Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is ASU 411 on this Monday, October 24th, 2016. Today I'm interviewing one of my teachers who I have this semester who pretty much has a passion for photography and teaching others about his passion. And here's my interview with Dr. Tait. How are you doing this afternoon, Dr. Tait?
Doing well.
Okay, now, I understand that when you were growing up, you grew up in Pittsburgh, is that correct?
That's correct. I grew up on the north side of Pittsburgh.
Okay. And tell us about what your life was like growing up there.
Sure. I grew up in a single-parent home. My father raised us from my age of 8 years old. My father raised my brother and I, and he attended the University of Pittsburgh as I was a young guy, and then graduated from the University of Pittsburgh in 1978 and started a barbershop.
You showed my photography class like a couple of like famous pictures that you took, and in one of the very first like photography classes, like you were with the very first President Bush.
Yes.
And I also saw on your Facebook account that you actually went to President Obama's inauguration, like back in like 2009. So,
Yeah.
Tell us what it was like meeting them or any other famous people that you met along the way.
Yeah. So my career has spanned 25 years, and I photograph all of the presidents.
Wow.
Since George Bush. Or actually, yeah, I didn't photograph Reagan. So since George Bush.
Wow.
And it's been, really amazing to, have the opportunity that your images will go out and help others to kind of identify with that person at that particular point in time. The inauguration for President Obama was probably one of the most fulfilling in that the historic implications of it, and that he was the first president who was African American.
Yeah.
But also he was a class act. The way he carried himself.
Wow.
And so that was good. One of the more memorable inaugurations was when George W. Bush was inaugurated. He had it was freezing rain that day, and I remember trying to make pictures in the midst of all of the rain. And,
wow.
And it was pretty. It was a long day.
Dang.
But yeah. So photographing the presidents has been fun. It's been interesting. Trying to tell the story of the event.
Wow. That's pretty interesting.
Can I add one more thing now?
If you want to.
I think probably the most memorable photograph that I've made, though, was of Rosa Parks.
Wow.
And I photographed Rosa Parks in Birmingham, Alabama.
Wow.
I want to say it was 2000. And they were dedicating a museum to her.
Wow.
And she invited me over to serve as her photographer. I was working for the Detroit Free Press. And what happened was they had her come in for a special screening, but she didn't know that Coretta Scott King, Martin Luther King's wife, was going to be there.
Oh, really?
And Emmett Till's mother were there. And I remember shooting like, wow, these are three pillars of the African American community. And Mrs. Parks started crying.
Wow.
And I remember that photograph was just like, wow, this is a piece of history that is just phenomenal. And so those are a couple instances of photographing what would be considered famous people that I had the privilege of trying to tell their story.
Wow. That's pretty interesting. Okay. So I understand that like one of your experiences in college was when like you got one of your degrees at Asbury University.
Yeah, at Asbury Seminary, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah.
So I did my PhD at a seminary.
Okay.
And that was a big transition in that I left my career where I was doing pretty well and said I was going to seminary.
Okay.
And so I did my master's degree. And what I was encouraged to do is to take the gift that I had, which was photography, and incorporate it in trying to learn how others see the world that they encounter. And so I created a research method called Sight Beyond My Sight, which uses a narrative where this double sight happens, where a person is able to see differently once they understand the context in which they are, in which they're photographing.
Wow. And that leads me up to my follow-up question, in which it goes like, how did you end up at ASU?
Dr. Gil Fowler actually recruited me to come here, and he called. I actually had 3 job offers, one in Pittsburgh, or actually, let me correct myself. I had 3 job offers that I was waiting on, and I had just returned back from Israel, and one of the offers fell through. And then I had a decision to make on ASU or A-State at that point in time, or another school. And what I actually did was I decided on A-State for the opportunity. I know that they had a photojournalism program, and the opportunity to really influence young people to really take pictures and tell their stories. I had a professor who had told me that I didn't really want to go and teach at a seminary because you had a larger group of people that would be afforded to you to teach at university. And so the community was very warm and accepting, and it wasn't too far from me getting from Kentucky, and so I just decided that it was a good fit. Now,
okay, I read somewhere where
I won $1 million.
Huh?
I won $1 million.
Oh. Okay, well, if you don't mind me asking you about this one thing, I read somewhere where there was a time in which, while you were taking pictures of something, you ended up getting arrested for it.
Yes.
So I was wondering if maybe you could fill us in on what happened and what happened as a result of that.
Sure. So I have been arrested twice.
Dang.
Once I was with the Detroit Free Press, and I think I sat in jail for, I don't know, maybe 2 hours. And then the second time, which is what you probably read about, was it was New Year's Day. And I was working for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. That was an interesting incident because I had just left the inauguration of the county executive.
Oh, wow.
And so I was at his inauguration, and then decided I was going to go home and get something to eat. And when so on my way home, I noticed that there was an auto accident, but the car had actually gone up in the trees, which was very unusual. And so I pulled my car up about a half a mile to a mile, and I walked back because there were people standing all around, and I started making pictures. And I always have my credentials that are there. And so my credentials were out, and a police officer came up, and he said, "You're going to leave from here." And obviously the First Amendment guarantees you the opportunity to photograph what's newsworthy.
Wow.
And so it just escalated from there. He didn't want me taking photographs. I told him that I have every right, and that there were other persons that were there, so it was not a safety concern.
Wow.
I had pulled off on the shoulder, and he just was determined to push the issue. Yes.
Thanks a lot. Okay. All right, folks. That was my interview with Dr. Tait, and you heard it here, folks. That's the story of my photography teacher.